Hi everyone, good morning. I hope my screen is showing now. Okay, so good morning everybody. I hope everyone is feeling awesome today. So as Winnie has introduced, my name is Lydia. I'm the account director from Thales CPL team, and we focus on data security. But this morning, I won't be sharing anything too technical or complex, but rather I just want to share with you why data protection is such a hot topic today and how we Thales can walk you through that journey. So before I begin, just allow me about 30 seconds to introduce who Thales is for some of our audience who may not know. Okay, just a short and sweet summary, but we are really a French multinational company. We does designing and building of electrical system and also services for aerospace, defense, transportation, and security. So we have like over 80,000 employees worldwide. Our presence is about 68 countries, and we have self-funded R&D facility. And no, we are currently one of the global leading vendor, not just in data protection, but in air traffic management, smart airport solution, and many others. So there, we have Thales. Okay, so right now, I'm just going to dive right into why data protection is such a hot topic today globally. Because, this is a fact. Today, data is literally exploding volumes across applications, storage, big data, cloud stores, and with the growth in digital that is springing out across the globes, no thanks to COVID, but organizations really need to find a way to manage all this growing data. So in order to manage risk and compliance, you need visibility over those data so that you can demonstrate compliance to the ever-changing, evolving data privacy regulation, which is happening all over the globe now. And this is very tough for any organization because demonstrating compliance is a very time-consuming and error-prone process of trying to understand and interpreting all the different laws because they're so varied and sometimes very open for interpretation, okay? And so, because data security is not an easy topic, so many people will say, hey, let's just go to cloud and let the cloud providers handle that for us. But the sad truth is it doesn't really matter where you move or shift your data to. Data security still remains your responsibility as a customer. Okay, and to prove my point, this is what Azul has to say. Even for AWS, Google, okay? And they all point at one very glaring point, that you as a customer, you are responsible for securing your data that you choose to shift to their cloud infra, not them. Okay, so this gets a little bit more serious. Okay, so I'm going to spend a little bit more time here. So in Singapore itself, we talk about PDPA, the law has been getting more and more serious. Okay, as of November last year, there has been a slight change in the bill for PDPA. So the maximum financial penalty now will be raised to 10% of the offending organization's annual turnover in Singapore if your gross annual turnover in Singapore exceeds 10 million or 1 million, whichever is higher. Okay, and also the new bill also proposed to require an organization to notify PTPC and the affected individual of a data breach if the breach results is likely to result in significant harm to the affected individual with some exceptions. You can read out the details on the new bill. So they also make it mandatory now for all organizations to notify PTPC if the scale of the breach is significant. So under this proposed amendment, okay, if an organization has reason to believe that a data breach has occurred in the organization, you need to conduct an assessment of whether this data is notifiable in a reasonable and manner, and and they need to assess if this is a notifiable data breach, and they have to inform PTPC within 3 calendar days once it has made that assessment. So we can see that in Singapore itself, the laws governing our data privacy is tightening. Okay. And today, if you are FI, okay, the revised technology risk management, we call it TRM, the guideline that was recently published this year on 18 January, okay, by MAS, it has imposed additional or more stringent requirement now on FIs as well. Okay, and one of the major update is the additional guidance on managing risk concerning what we call API, application programming interfaces, which previously wasn't in the 2013 TRM guideline. Okay, so I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on it. Okay, so API enable various software applications to communicate, interact with each other, right, and exchange information. So what happened is in this revised guideline in 2021, it actually provides more specific guidance on different safeguards to deal with concern of open API that are used by third party to implement products and services for customer and the marketplace. But one thing that really stand out was that FI must now establish security standards for designing and developing secure API, and they need to adopt strong encryption standards and key management control to secure the transmission of sensitive data through APIs. So why are all the tightening around data privacy? We already have so many laws governing it, because let's be truthful, these are all the recent breach that is happening. And data breaches is getting more and more rampant as we speak. Every month, we are hearing news of organizations whose sensitive information got breached or leaked. Is it because they never invest in security, securing their perimeter, or is it just some gaps that, they are missing out because they do not know, because they don't have that visibility? So I'm not going to elaborate too much on the downside, when your company's data is breached, because, financial penalty, we all know, okay? But there's less tangible stuff that is at stake here. So we are talking about credibility, we are talking about brand damage that can take a much longer time to recover. Okay, so in Thales, we always advocate having visibility into your assets, whether they are data or whether they are devices. And that's the cornerstone of every robust security program. You can't protect something that you don't know exists. Okay, so having visibility into where your sensitive data resides and the ability to classify them according to their risk level is really critical, okay, to implementing the appropriate measures or policies to ensure that a certain level of security is being applied. Okay, so you can kind of guess where I am driving us towards. So before you embark on any data protection program, you always start with having a clear understanding of your data. So what do I mean? The ability to find any type of sensitive data. It can be things like IC numbers, it can be mobile numbers, it can be sitting in any storage, cloud, structured, unstructured data. Able to classify those data that are at risk, ideally in compliance with GDPR or PDPA guidelines. And finally, the ability to apply remediation where appropriate will greatly assist any organization today to simplify their data security. Okay. So before we move on further, okay, I just want to drive this point across, because I have so many conversations with organizations who confuses data privacy with data security. Data privacy is part of data security and is very much related to proper handling of data, how you collect it, how you use it, and maintaining compliance. But data security is about access. It's about protecting your data from unauthorized user. Yes, even apply to internal DBA, for example, through different forms of encryption, key management, and authentication. So yes, data protection is not easy to deploy. It's not easy to tackle. And we know that we have multiple challenges to address. So we need to know what is sensitive data. You need to know how to apply the correct policies, the control to protect it. You need to, comply with all the different global regulations that govern all these personal data. You also need to protect it from third-party data access risk, because we share data. So who do you share your data with? A partner, a service provider, other customer? And as digital transformation continues to grow, more sensitive data are being transferred to public cloud providers. So how are those data being protected? Is there an easier way to proactively secure your data, mitigate the risk, and still respond to all the regulatory requirements? Okay, so let me share how Thales may be able to help you out with this. Because we already know complexity translates to poor visibility, security, and control. So data is being distributed across cloud, hybrid environments at accelerated rates to meet the demands of all the growing remote workers, especially since last year. And further adding to, all this add to the complexity of protecting all the sensitive information that is flowing around. And in the latest data security survey we did, we realized that, only 54% of organizations know where all their sensitive data is being stored. 52% of some of this data inside the organization remain unclassified, so nobody even know whether they are sensitive or not. 43% of the sensitive data that is already in the cloud is left unencrypted, and 53% of organizations do not control the keys of their encrypted data into the cloud. So what Thales do is we try to simplify your data protection journey, because we understand data protection takes time to plan, to implement. So we follow a step-by-step methodology where we start off with what would be easiest to deploy, shortest time to meet compliance, and with minimal disruption to your operation and business. So in this journey, we begin by first understanding your organization's data security challenges, and we advise accordingly where you should start and how to start. So later on, our partner Kenny from Adnovum will be sharing more on how. So I'm not going to go into the details of how. So but today, because Thales has been doing data protection for so long now, so our next generation data security platform is now available to really simplify data security and to help you accelerate your time to meet compliance, which is ever changing, and to secure your cloud migration. So we have a platform, we call it CipherTrust Data Security Platform. Okay, it's actually a unified data security platform which secures your data end to end. It doesn't matter where your data sits today. We have the most comprehensive connectors to work with different databases, application, you name it, MS SQL, Oracle, Postgres. We are probably the only data security partners that's certified to secure SAP HANA today. And we also work with most of the popular public cloud providers. And that's why we are able to walk that journey with you. Okay, so with that, I think I more or less come to the end of my presentation. So I'm going to pass the time now to Kenny. So they're going to share how they're going to value add to your data protection journey. So over to you, Kenny.
Hi, thank you, Lydia. Thanks, Winnie, for the intro as well. Thank you, Lydia, for sharing such a comprehensive deck of slides and also materials on data protection and data security. So my name is Kenny. I lead the security consulting practice in Adnovum, and today I will be sharing with you a bit more on this topic around data security, data privacy, and data protection, right? So I only have 12 slides, so please bear with me. And I understand that we have a mixture of audiences where it ranges from security folks, people, as well as a business application folks of people as well. So please bear with me for the first few slides to run through some rudimentary things to set the stage and to showcase the principles. Yeah. So I think Lydia touched a little bit about the why it is important, and all the data breaches that's happening. And if you look at this slide over here, it is not particularly to pinpoint any brand, but if you look at the timeline of when it is happening, right, it is around late last year and this year as well. And not only that, these are the more recent ones that has happened, where you have all these organizations suffered tremendous breaches into their so-called personal data or personal information from their consumers, right, for their customers. And we are also living in a world or a situation where it is a little bit unprecedented, that this pandemic has happened probably a few decades ago, right? We have probably not encountered this, and this is a new phase for everyone, where the world order has changed, right? The way the new norm is taking its stage, where all these changes are happening. So, and when organizations go through these changes, they are also, we see a shift in terms of how they showing up. Sorry, I understand that my PowerPoint is not showing up. Some technical glitches. Let me try to share again. Can you all see my screen? Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. So this is the slide that I was explaining on the data breaches, right? This is only my first slide. Sorry about that. Coming back to where I left off, we are seeing the transformation from the digital side, where organizations are planning to move. This is not only happening because of the pandemic. What we have also understand and learned from the industry is that it has only accelerated the transition, the move to cloud. And because of this, I think sometimes, unfortunately, being security folks, the security element or the aspects of things somehow takes a back seat, right? And because that they are accelerating their transition to the cloud, therefore this is somehow deprioritized, all right? And because of that, that's why we are seeing probably some lapses of it. And what are the things that the organization is typically undergoing? It is a tremendous shift where it is different of how you approach protecting your data on premise, because you have full control of most of the things, versus how you protect your data in the cloud, right? It is almost chicken and sorry, not chicken and egg. It's probably like a fitting a square peg in a round hole, right? So moving on to the next slide, I just want to touch a little bit about the amount of data that you have, organizations have. I think Lydia also touched on a little bit about the data being in an explosion phase where data is growing tremendously. How organizations are generating and creating all this data, and also receiving and consuming this data as well. So from a data lifecycle perspective, it is very important to understand all the different phases of the data lifecycle, how it transits from data creation, generation, or collection, to how is it being stored, processed, used, shared, and then of course you have your organization policies to archive, to retain your data, and then ultimately how do you securely destroy your data, right? And having in mind all this data that you have, we always advocate that not all data is important, right? Not all data is sensitive. So you need to have a rudimentary approach, very strong approach management plan as well on how you start classifying your data, because you don't want to apply the same security setting and policy across every data that you have, right? So having an understanding of all the regulations, the laws that applies, the compliance, internal compliances, and the audit that is you're subjected to, your organization is subjected to, based on either your services that you're offering, right? It's very important then to map back to how you are protecting or securing your data throughout this entire life cycle. All right. So moving on a little bit more about data security principles, and I think this is fundamentals to understand that in data security, based on the data life cycle that I've shared with you earlier, at every stage or every phase of the data being created or used or being processed, it fundamentally takes different shapes and forms, right? Whether is it at rest or at storage, where it arrives at the final destination before being either archived or being used again, right? Then you have the phase where data is being used. This is when it is being processed by the application or being analyzed from a big data standpoint, right? And of course, when you're transacting with your consumers or different stakeholders, the data is also traversing from different points or from the source to the destination. So all this, having understanding of how the data takes what form and shape and how is it being used is very important, because that's also part of the journey that you need to have a very good visibility of, right, from your application standpoint on how your data is being consumed. And just to touch a little bit about the security control of functions that typically you need to think about when you apply data security, right? On all the different, like what I mentioned in the past two slides, where is it in the data life cycle, and how, in what shape or form is the data is being traversing your network or is being stored, right? So whether it is a preventive control is mainly about a deterrent point of security where you're trying to prevent any unauthorized access to your data, right? That's deterring people from either from outside or inside your organization from accessing the data that is they're not supposed to access, right? So all this translates to things like physical security, like barbed wire fences, biometric security patrols, and stuff like that, right? And it also translates to more infrastructure security type of preventive controls, such as firewalls, IPSs, or process level controls, such as separation of duties. These are preventive in nature. Then you have the security control that is detective in nature. What this aims to do is that it is supposed to help organizations to detect, notify, alert of any security threats when and as it happens, when there's an activity or an event, right? For example, if you have an unauthorized breach, if you have put in a detective security control on the said data that is sensitive, then you should be able to pick up an alert from your security operations or your network operations that something is happening, right? And of course, the alert needs to be sent to the right people to take certain actions. Then we flow on to the corrective controls, right? That is mainly around how you restore, how you get back on your feet when something has happened, right? This talks about all the different types of process controls, as well as technical capability as well, so that you are able to translate back to your good state before the breach, and also restore, and also keep in mind all the integrity of the systems, the confidentiality of the systems are in place. At the same time, you also need to think about how to communicate, how to manage the incident of a data breach. You also need to, if let's say there's a reporting responsibility, then you also need to report to the relevant authorities or the regulators that there's a breach happening, and you need to know what is the scope of the breach, what data is being leaked out or being breached, right? So all this has to, the organization needs to be able to respond decisively and needing to have the data points of what is the breach about, right? Then I'll flow into what Lydia was sharing earlier, that because of the explosion of data, right? And there's so much data these days within an organization that sometimes it is just manually impossible to keep track of all this data, right? And I think from a human mind perspective, probably you're able to know what you know, but the danger is that you don't know what you don't know, right? And most of the time we are trying to respond to something that we know, or we assume that we know, right? Based on what we can see, right? So it's very important also to know that whatever that you know potentially differs or different from what is the reality, right? Because you have assumed that maybe this iceberg is of such a size, but in fact, it is so much bigger, right? You don't know what you are not covering. So visibility of the data and the classification of the sensitivity level, the confidentiality level in your environment is very important. That is the first step that I think one of the things that you need to begin with. And you also need to have a mindset that this is not a static item, right? Data is being generated by the seconds. Data is evolving, is being transferred, is being utilized, processed, and so on and so forth. So you need to be expecting changes, constant change. So this is one of my favorite lines, that change is the only constant that we need to expect, right? And how are you able to keep up with all these changes while you are still trying to address what you don't know and what you think is doesn't equate to a reality, right? And there goes this is also one of my favorite slides. This is what I call the quadrant of truth, where you have basically what you know on the right-hand side, right, on the x-axis, and whether or not whatever that you know on the y-axis is based on, is it factual, or is it based on assumption, or is it based on, in these days terms, fake news, right? So, of course, X, the point X, the top right-hand corner is where you want to be, right? You need to know what you need to have the maximum of the knowledge of your environment, and it needs to be based on facts and data points, right, that supports that. Now, reflecting back on my previous slides, you don't know what you don't know is probably sitting in Y, and that's probably what you want to get the knowledge of as well. And the reason why I say that, because there's so much data in an environment, it is coming to a point that it's difficult to get visibility. That's why let tools help your organizations to move your perspective from point Y to point X. Let the discovery happen. Let the scanning or whatever that needs to take place by the tool, let them tell you, right, in a very organized, scheduled, rudimentary manner that, hey, these are all the data that you have. And then you're able to take certain decision points and action on it, right? And then it comes to the lower quadrant, which is on the right-hand side, which I mentioned earlier in my point, that you think you know what you know, but those are based on assumptions, or it may have already been outdated, right? The time that you try to act upon it is no longer true because it's dated half a year ago or 1 year ago, right? So let's try to move this to be more factual, and that's where you need to continuously monitor your ever-changing environment, right? These days, we are not just about doing a snapshot. We need to do it more frequently as well, so that you have the visibility of your environment as you perform whatever that you need to build, whatever that you need to offer as a service, right? Then, of course, we also need to be mindful that because the landscape is changing, there's some amount of flexibility and extensibility that's needed in terms of how you assess, adapt, and adopt. This is also very important so that your organization, your operations stays nimble. You're still able to offer whatever services and roll them out to your customers, to the business without any impact, right? And of course, if you ask me what is in the last quadrant, I will tell you that don't waste time, right? Because this is the knowledge or that is not factual, that is probably, it doesn't warrant the time to even to be focused on, right? So you only address the high priority items and how you classify them. So where do we move on from here? And this is probably, let's start with identify all the different data stores that you have, right? Whether it's serving your internal function or whether it's for your customers facing data stores, or maybe it's more for collaborative with business partners, so on and so forth, right? Start doing all this discovery in terms of understanding where your data stores are and understanding of whether or not they are structured, unstructured, whether it's sitting on premise, whether it's in the cloud, right? And having a very good visibility of all these data stores is probably one of the first steps to start this journey of discovery and classification, okay? So now, once you've identified all the data stores and you probably have certain understanding that, oh, there are potentially sensitive or classified information in some of these data stores. Then why this is important? Because it is preventing, or what it's trying to address is all these different threat vectors. I think for those that is in the security space or CISOs, you will learn to appreciate this, that I think from a security principle in general, we always advocate security in layers, right? Defense in depth. And there is, and this is also not saying that this is the only product or only solution that solves every single thing, every single threat, or the silver bullet for data breaches. No, I'm not saying that, because if you've been in the security industry long enough, you know that every different solution being put in addresses to some extent certain use cases or certain threat vectors and how it's being addressed, right? So first threat vector from external, I think Lydia covered from a product standpoint, the Cipher Data Security Platform. That's a new offering. And one of the fundamentals reason why that is, why I'm highlighting that here is because it offers not only the discovery and classification capability, that is a new capability that they have, but also the protection and the security side of it, right? The securing the data. So first of all, the external threats, you need, the security principle over here is that you are supposed to secure and protect all sensitive and confidential digital asset, right? And once you do that, and one is covered under the platform, you are able to both prevent and detect any unauthorized access or breaches to these data. Because what I've mentioned here is that given it has already been classified, you know what to protect already, and it is actively being protected, all right? Next is the threat vector from an internal point of view, corporate espionage. And these are probably actors that they already have certain amount of access to the environment because they are sitting within the organization, right? They have some logins, they have some accounts within the environment. So what I'm trying to highlight here is that, is that the data discovery and classification process is helping to fish out and flag out based on certain roles and based on certain account permissions or privileges, right? You need to apply them correctly, first of all. And second of all, after you apply them correctly, how do you validate that it is applied correctly? So this is where the data discovery and classification will help, because we are able to discover based on the access level based on a certain role, right? Then after you do the discovery and scan based on this particular role or account privilege, you know that you can apply based on the security principle of access based on least privilege, right? So if this particular role is able to view, if you're able to discover the data based on this account or role, then something is wrong. Then you need to take action, that you need to tighten that this is probably a loophole, that a person of this, having this role, having this account, is able to access sensitive classified data within your organization. So that's tightening to be done, right? And last but not least, what it's trying to address is some lapses in terms of administration or operational BAU activities. Sometimes it can be intentional, sometimes it may not be intentional. This is what we call security misconfiguration, where, well, it's in the news where you have all these S3 bucket leaks that's happening because maybe the outsourced third-party vendor didn't apply the right security controls, or when something has changed, right, they forgot to migrate all these security configuration changes to the new platform, right? So again, similarly, the discovery and classification process will help you to make sure that, hey, whatever that you're able to discover in your environment based on, for example, public access, are you able to see what an internal organization is only allowed to see, right? So this is one of the threat vectors and what it's trying to address here, okay? And based on security best practices, I just want to run through very quickly in terms of the guidelines. Again, I'm taking NIST Cybersecurity Framework as a reference here. So based on the asset management category, the organizations is supposed to map out all your data flows and your communication, right? So that points me to the principle that I shared with you earlier, the data lifecycle. You need to know how the data is flowing, how is it transforming, right? That needs to be documented, hopefully. And then, of course, the second item is on resources. You need to manage your asset. Data is an asset, depending whether it is public information or it is intellectual property patent. It is an asset to a different degree, right? So doing an asset inventory and management is important, and you need to start classifying based on the priority and the criticality and to your business, right? Second category is based on identity management, authentication, and access control. This is, like I mentioned in my previous slide, is equally important that after you discover all this data, and if it is sensitive, you need to be able to apply the right access and authorization control to this data itself, right? Again, based on the principle of least privilege and SODs. So, I think what the solution offers is a different tier of access control permission that can be applied based on the sensitivity level of the data that you're trying to protect. Okay, and last but not least, of course, this is rudimentary fundamentals for data security. You need to protect data at rest, in transit, and you need to employ all these protection mechanisms to prevent against data leak. Okay, so moving on. So touching a little bit about the tool itself. Okay, the data discovery and classification tool is able to give you to provide a view that is coming from a regulatory standpoint, that you can, once the scanning is done, it is able to share with you and give you a view that, hey, what regulatory or classification profiles does this address or impact, right? So for example, after you discover a certain piece of sensitive data based on for example, based on GDPR, right? So it is able to tell you that all this data is being flagged up because it has detected it contains certain personal information, PII data, that is supposedly breaching GDPR guidelines. All right. So this is a view that's also very important, so that after you have done the scanning or the discovery, it is able to tell you very quickly of what regulatory this is addressing. So again, I think Thales as a platform, it is continuously updating all these different regulations and enhancing putting all this into the system for profiling and for classification. And from a reporting standpoint, what the tool is able to help you with is a bird's eye view in terms of what are all the different information types, breaking down in terms of financial data, PII, health records, or whatever, national IDs. And then you can have an understanding of where is it located, right, by content. So this is very important before you start zooming down on the different types of whether is it how you need to action upon it and how you need to remediate all these different findings. All right. And last but not least, it will also identify where is the data located, what is the object name it has identified that tags this particular finding of maybe a data point that is impacting a GDPR guidelines, right? So I'm coming to the last slide. So the question is then, what needs to be done and how, right? And I think the competitive advantage over here is that I think we are living in a world that trust and confidence is built through certain measures that an organization take to demonstrate that they're able to protect and secure the data of their consumers and also internally. That adds up to brand reputation and branding. Of course, having compliance and certification goes a long way because it just demonstrates with the least amount of words possible that, hey, this is important to my organization. I have gone through the process of being certified, and this is it, me showing that, hey, I'm ISO certified or I'm GDPR compliant and stuff, so and so forth. Then, of course, having good understanding and having a very comprehensive organization-wide data privacy or data protection management program is also very important, so that from a external point of view, it all adds up to the brand reputation that any external party is able to run through and look at, hey, these guys are serious and they take data privacy very seriously, right? And of course, there's the whole other pointers about enterprise capability, the maturity of your how you manage the data and how you keep abreast with the technology in-house. That adds on to the complexity of your environment and how well you are able to serve your internal stakeholders on how to roll out new services. That is always a complementary internal struggle that you need to deal with, because the faster and the easier that you can offer all these data security practices without the business ever required to sweat or put so much emphasis on it, the more transparent it is, and the more easy that you are taking over this function over from them, and to them it is very something that they don't need to worry that much of. That puts you also in the front line, that you're able to offer and go to market faster, easier, and more secure, right? And last but not least, of course, I was talking about the continuous monitoring, and having a very good cybersecurity hygiene is absolutely important, all right? And every journey starts with a single step. So I think over here, in collaboration with Thales, we are offering a complimentary assessment to all the attendees for this webinar. So thank you for your time in attending this webinar with us. And I think that's the end of my slides here. I will pass this back on to Beanie, who will take on the Q&A. And before I sign off, I just want to wish all of you a good day ahead, and also stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you, Lydia. So before we end the session, we do have some questions from the audiences. But there are, let me see, the first one, Lydia, maybe this is for you. What is the typical and reasonable time frame to expect, for an organization planning to embark on their data protection journey, especially while everybody is working remotely?
Okay, so the good thing about our data protection journey is that if we are talking about just getting started, okay, I will estimate for an organization, if you have probably less than 10 file servers or database servers to protect, you just want to do a quick protection, to meet compliance. I would safely estimate within a month, with very minimal operational downtime, So yeah, so that's a very quick and fast way, to get compliance with data privacy.
Okay, so 1 month, that's fast and good. Thank you, Lydia. So for the next question, I guess this is for Kenny. For the data discovery and classification complementary scan, is there any prerequisites?
Good question. So I don't want to delve so much into the technical prerequisites, because we will have people reaching out to the attendees, of course, for this complimentary assessment. Then we will discuss more on the technical side of things. But from a commercial standpoint, I think what is the prerequisite here is probably around if your organization would like to have some non-disclosure agreement being taken up. So we have that ready, of course, so that it facilitates the process to undergo this assessment. If there's no requirement for that from the organization, then technically we can start pretty fast. And for the technical requirements or the prerequisites, we will have more in-depth discussion after understanding what are the things that you would like to discover or scan, because it varies. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Kenny. So for all of you attending this webinar today, we will be reaching out to you to assess whether you would like to take on this complimentary scan. So we've come to the end of this webinar. We trust that you have found this webinar useful and some key takeaways from Lydia and Kenny. So thanks again, speakers, for joining us today. If any of you have any feedbacks or comments, please do not hesitate to let us know, or at the end of this webinar, we will be sending you a post-event survey to complete. Once again, thank you. Do check out, do keep us, do sign up for us, and we will be sending you more on-demand webinars, including for encryption, key management, cloud data security, and access management solutions. Goodbye for now. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.